is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sunshine by Robin McKinley, sponsored by Rosalie Oceana Kolb. In these chapters, I find out that trolling means something much different in this world, and I still don't entirely understand what's happening with Con. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. And yeah, this section, guys, there are some new players being added to the equation here. There is one main thing I want to talk about before we get into what's going on with SOF. I don't understand, and Rosalie's here in the chat, so hopefully she can help me. I don't know if this is a spoiler or not. I don't understand exactly what Sunshine did that helped Con. I'm not clear on how obviously she talks about what the live read in which he has a hard-on and is about to have sex with her. It is described how he is his body temperature is changing and all of this stuff. But I thought that was a result of his sex drive. Is that actually a result of whatever she's doing to help him? Is the sex drive a result? Whatever she's doing doesn't appear to be on purpose. 'Cause she doesn't describe any sort of effort specifically to help. The spell she does is just to get there to wherever he is. So I don't really understand how just appearing where he is and almost having sex with him seems to have set him right. But that appears to be the case. And I have to confess being extremely confused on this point. And I was reading the entire section between the two of them, waiting for some sort of explanation or waiting for him to talk about how ill he was and what they were going to have to do or anything. And there is nothing. So I feel like I missed something somewhere, and maybe I did. But I don't really understand. Rosalie says, I didn't reread this section, so I'm not sure where the kind of explanation is, but I think there is one. Okay, I'll have to go back because I kept my eyes open for it, waiting for something specific. And the only thing that we really got was an explanation of why he's not doing well, which is that he was being pursued by some of Bo's thugs, Bo's Thugs and Harmony. And he, winds up pretty weakened by that, but I don't know what she does when she arrives helps him. So I'm just really curious if I missed something. If anybody in the audience or anybody who's listening can help me out with that, please let me know and get in touch with me. So this whole thing where she's with Bo, you hear me, with Con, is really alarming. And I enjoy that about it, to be honest. There's a lot about this book that decides to go hardcore classic with the whole vampire trope that is really refreshing after so long of this vampires drink blood, but they can be all right if they want. And also they're really rich and have impeccable taste and live in these incredible, tailored mansions that are super tasteful. And instead we wound up getting all of the sorry, I got distracted because somebody messaged me. Instead we get all of the, weird, body part, motif in the decorating and all of the, demons and satyrs and yada, yada, yada. It's just the kind of thing that like you want in a vampire lair. It actually, if you guys have seen Penny Dreadful, there is a witch character with an incredible home. And it reminds me of that a little bit. But it was, of course, not what I was expecting at all for what do you call it? Khan's home. And he hesitates to even call it a home. Because this is all, it turns out, left over from his master. Which we don't get that much info on his master. This guy seemed like he was pretty bad news. He seems like he had a little bit of the craziness, a desire for world domination, underworld domination, I suppose. And she keeps on thinking to herself how she wants to ask questions, but every time she gets an answer, it's so terrible that she decides that she kind of doesn't want to ask anymore, which I really understand. But I really wish that she had asked more about the circumstances of Beau working with his master, because all he tells her is, first of all, I was not interested in being turned. I was not happy about it. I didn't appreciate it. But that when you are first turned as a vampire, there is a lot of vulnerability that plays into that. And you are sort of attached to the person who sired you in a way that people don't really understand. And so I wound up a little bit dependent on him, and also fell in with like his mission, and the mission being, underworld domination. So I'm very, like, he talks about the fact that they didn't meet eye to eye on a lot of things. One of them later on turns out to be like imbuing objects with power instead of using other methods that are not so easily thwarted. Beau, I keep calling him that, his master. I don't think we ever get his master's name, right? He just calls him my master. His master used a lot of spells imbued in items around the house as like protective defensive measures. And Khan is of the mind that is like kind of too brittle and easy to break. And when she asks him what kind of defensive measures Beau employs, he tells her that Beau imbues power into his people, which is interesting. I'm not exactly sure how that turns out, like what that looks like in terms of if you kill somebody, is that like in Dresden Files, if you kill a wizard, if they have the chance before they die to sick you with their killing curse, their death curse, that can be really, really powerful. So killing a wizard can be in itself a very dangerous thing. And I'm wondering about that. Like, do his henchmen function in such a way that if you kill one of them, if you don't completely catch them by surprise with a table knife like she managed to do you wind up like taking on some kind of risk by doing that? Are they like bombs, and trying to defuse them could set them off? And she's drinking out of this goblet the whole time, because when she wakes up, at first she thinks she's dreaming because this place is super gothic. She's wearing this white and black fur robe, and there's this like moment, and I'm going to find this quote because I highlighted it because I didn't understand exactly what this meant. She says something about how maybe it was a creature that hadn't existed till a vampire killed it. Here it is. The fur I was wrapped in appeared to be real fur, long and silky, in jagged black and white stripes. I couldn't think what animal it might be. Something that didn't exist, perhaps, till a vampire killed it. What does that mean? I don't understand that sentence. Something that didn't exist until a vampire killed it? Is she insinuating that, like, maybe there are animals out there that, like, they change color when they're killed? Rachel is saying, like, maybe it was mythical. But then it's not like it wouldn't exist. Or is she just using that as, like, a play on words to be, like, okay, yeah, people didn't think it was real. Maybe. It's a weirdly constructed sentence that, like, really threw me off for a second. And then the buttons on the back of the sofa I was lying on were tiny gargoyle faces, sticking their tongues out or poking their fingers up their noses. Every now and then they weren't faces at all, but a pair of buttocks. The sofa itself was some kind of purple plush velvet, except that the shadows it laid were lavender. This is so disorienting. I really enjoy her writing in such detail about her surroundings, because it really does sound simultaneously really repulsive and also really, like, beautiful in a weird way. Repulsive glamour. Does that make sense? The fur could have been dyed, but somehow this didn't suit my idea of vampire chic. Actually, Con didn't suit my idea of vampire chic. This hectic gothic sensibility was a surprise. Interesting decorating principles, I said. He glanced around briefly as if reminding himself what was there. My master had a sense of the dramatic. Your master? This is his room. Silence fell. I love this so much. She sighs, and finally Con's like, do you want to hear about my master? And she's so irritated, like she just wants him to tell her what the fuck. And he's not volunteering any information, and she's so tired of having to drag everything out of him, and I feel her so much on this. Like, Con, guy, you need to meet her halfway. Goddamn, dude. She literally traveled through a void to find you and help you. Give her something. Christ. So, yeah, this is when he describes being turned, that this was like 400 or 500 years ago. And he says that, you know, that he wanted to rule things and he might have succeeded, but he had bad luck and a powerful and bitter enemy with better luck. He finally gives up on that because he gets beaten so soundly. And he turns collector. And that's partially because he decides that he's going to hide from everybody and use this as defense to keep anybody from finding him. So she's thinking to herself again, like, well, why had he stayed? Like, this guy turned him, and there was a mission that he had initially that Con was apparently, you know, committed to, if only because of the fact that this guy was his sire. But then eventually he lost, and Con stayed, evidently. So what's that about? Your master's bitter enemy, was it Beau? No, Beau's master. I destroyed his master. It's only Beau now. So at this point, she is freaking out about the fact that Beau's, like, master was the one that beat Con's master? Like, that they are so closely matched that things are just not looking great for them, it seems. That's the impression that I'm getting from her, because she panics when he tells her that it was Beau's master, because Beau in her mind is the big bad. So there was a bigger and badder at one point, which I understand being really freaky. And here comes the moment where she finds out what the what do you call it? Goblet is. Oh, Rosalie is checking on something. I'm rereading, and maybe was Con stuck in the other space this whole time and not really at his house. He said it was hard for him to escape Beau's dudes, so I thought maybe he'd had to go dark so they couldn't sense him, but he was weaker than he thought, so he went too deep and couldn't wake himself up. Oh. So when she went into that in-between space, it wasn't just because of it being a mode of travel, it's because that's where he was. somehow. That's interesting. Okay, so she like knocked him out of this like kind of hibernation mode that he had gone into inadvertently. Okay, I'm seeing it. Yeah, I somehow just totally missed that. And Rachel is saying, I'll re-listen and start and try to figure out what part you were asking. Yeah, I was asking Rachel exactly what it was that Ray had done to help Khan. Like, I didn't understand what she'd done that had saved him. Because it seemed like basically what it seemed like was that she had just stumbled into him while he was napping. So that makes sense. Okay. I'm on board. I get it. So that's cool. So she thinks to herself, first of all, right before she asks this question, about how she wanted to be back at the shop making cinnamon rolls and reading and drinking tea and hanging out with Mel and all of this. And then thinks, I had been here before. I had once had all that. And I drove out to the lake one night to get away from it. Which is really one of those moments where, yeah, we don't appreciate shit until it's gone, do we? What is this thing anyway? I said, heaving the goblet up. I conceded and used 2 hands. It could be a loving cup, first prize in Vampire League sports. You didn't fill it with champagne, of course. You cut off the heads of the losing team and poured their blood in. Champagne later, maybe, when they ran out of the hard stuff. It is the cup of souls from the ceremony of gathering at Oran Hallow. What? I put it down hastily. Just stop asking questions, Sunshine. No wonder it goddamn tingled against my goddamn hand. Nobody knows where Oran Hallow is. Well, nobody who knows is telling the rest of us. It's not a big issue on the Dark Line, but it's one of the things that keeps coming up. Among the people who think it exists somewhere, you could describe by latitude and longitude, none of the plausible guesses are anywhere near New Arcadia, but there isn't any consensus on whether it is a geographic place or merely a part of the rite. It is a big magic handler's rite, done by clan. The Blazes probably knew how and where to do it, but I didn't. I didn't know anything about cups of souls or ceremonies of gathering, but I didn't want to. It's one of the few articles in this room that my master was given. It was not freely given. It was offered and accepted as payment for a task he had undertaken that was to their mutual benefit. There was some choice about the conclusion to this task. This reward was proposed as persuasion to make one choice instead of another. The cup carries no taint that might distress you. Then why does it buzz against my skin? I said crossly. Perhaps because it was the Blaze clan that possessed it, said Khan. To which Ray promptly freaks the fuck out. Freaks out. Like, tries to literally run away from it. Which, honestly, a lot of her responses throughout this book I have totally understood and related to. This one I did not. I don't think I've ever, just tried to flee an object before. And I don't entirely understand why she would want... What is she running from? The buzzing... She's still drinking the wine. It's not hurting her or doing anything to her. So what is she even afraid of here exactly? But nevertheless, regardless of how much sense that actually makes, this is what she does. And she doesn't get very far. She tries to flee, and this place is so full of shit. It's like trying to run in the dark through a thrift store. And she immediately trips over an ottoman and falls down and thinks about how she's going to have a million more bruises that she needs to cover up. This girl, man, she cannot make it a day without injuring herself or getting injured by somebody. And she finally picks herself up and goes back to the fire and comforts herself. And this is something that I really do understand, with the fact that the fire is a real fire. It felt like a real fire, it smelled like a real fire, and when I leaned too close to the smoke, it made my eyes sting. It spat like a real fire, too, and since there was no fire guard, a spark fell onto the hearthrug. I glanced down. The hearthrug was unexpectedly unprepossessing, the fur short and brownish and patchy, having had sparks fly into it before. A few new burns wouldn't ruin its looks because it didn't have any. I felt hearthruggish. I'd never worried about my looks much. I had always had other things to worry about, like making cinnamon rolls and getting enough sleep. But I was beginning to feel rather too burn-marked, like I'd been lying too near a fire with no fire guard. I liked that little bit. I feel hearthruggish. So she asks him at this point, so what now? What do we do? He tells her that he's going to take her home. And there's a little bit of her like that's thinking to herself, okay, I'm cool with that. But also I'm a little worried that you're way too close to my house. Like when he tells her that it's only an hour until sunrise, she really freaks out at the fact that he's close enough to get to her house in an hour, which to me, an hour feels like a perfectly fine distance. But it turns out the distance isn't really like an issue anyway, because it's not exactly how they go back. It's not clear exactly how they go back. He does something, but we'll get there. So this is when they start talking about the defenses and everything. She says that I hope you're better defended than Bo. And he says, I hope so too. And then they begin talking about the objects. I have always preferred solitude and have improved on his arrangements. I have some reason to believe that if I never left this place, no one would be able to come for me. And she mentions, yeah, but I was able to. And he's like, yeah, we have a weird bond that allows you to do that, but you're like the only one who could do that. And there's an interesting detail here. I don't know what to make of this exactly. When she looks at him, the shadows don't move and they don't have red edges and they don't sparkle or wiggle or anything. And later on, there's a whole thing with like shadows looking weird on somebody else too. I'm just so curious about what these shadows mean exactly. So finally, they, talking about Bo and what they're going to have to do, it becomes clear like they're going to have to sort of go up against him. And they actually say it here for the first time. And she tells him about the fact that she has kind of a line on Bo herself, is the way that she puts it. And he doesn't seem to be that surprised by that, which I guess makes sense. But she kind of is irritated by the fact that he seems to take it for granted that she'd have figured out a way to find him. I will come to you if I may, he said. You would rather I didn't come here again. I hadn't meant to say that either, but it popped out. A clear trace of surprise showed on his face for about a third of a second. I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't been looking straight at him, but it was there. You may come here if you wish. Come. I will give you a token. So they go to this cupboard that she immediately hates. It's covered with all of these carvings and curlicues, and there's satyrs and everything. And it's interesting to me that she dislikes this cupboard so much. I don't know if it means anything, but there's so much like ugliness in this room that the fact that she zeroes in on this cupboard in particular means to me that it must signify something. So he asks her why the cup distressed her, and she tells him as much of the truth as she can kind of get at herself in her own mind. She says that, the whole thing with magic is not like her family, the Blazes. This is not something that she wanted or knew about. It wound up being an inadvertent thing that her magic started being used again because she had to do it after being captured. That it caused this bond between her and him that she doesn't really understand, really doesn't want. And, overall, all of this has completely changed her life. And she doesn't have any training. So all of this magic, all well and good that she can do it, but she doesn't want to be doing it. She's not excited about this. She doesn't know how to do it and control it and manage it and direct it. So it makes her feel really vulnerable and exposed. So as she's telling him this, he opens the cupboard, and inside were rows and rows of tiny drawers. I could feel it wasn't heat, and it wasn't a smell, and it wasn't tiny voices, but it was a little like all three together. There were dozens of things in those drawers, and not an inner one in the lot. They were all yelling, secreting, radiating, a kind of me, 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 like the jock kids in school when the coach is choosing teams. I wondered what the cupboard was made of. I didn't feel like touching it myself and seeing if it might tell me anything. I didn't like the grins on the faces of the satyrs. So he pulls out this chain that looks almost like opal. It's got an iridescence. And it's sort of making this like low humming song. And as he begins to like move it and turn it over his fingers, the sound shifts and changes until it becomes something that makes her feel familiar and comfortable and safe. And she gets the sense that that's what it's doing. It's trying to become familiar and comfortable and safe because that's part of its magic, and that it's trying to like get near to her somehow. So finally, she automatically reaches out for it as if it's hers, and she knows it's hers, and she's just taking it back, and puts it over her head. And there, like, as she's putting it on, she's thinking to herself, what incredible magic this is. That there is, she calls it a convergence. I had never heard of anything quite like this convergence. Usually you had to make a terrific effort to match things up even a quarter so well as this. Of course, what I didn't know about magic handling would fill libraries. And he says, I thought I would be glad to go to you. She says, wait, what? And he says, my master was vexed when he discovered the necklet would, and he calls it a necklet, not a necklace, a necklet, would not work for him, nor any of our kind. This cupboard contains some of his other disappointments. They're human things, and they have seen no humans since they were brought here. They do not love being idle. Some of them are very powerful. I can restrain them, even if I cannot use them. I would offer them to you if there was any indication I wouldn't make a total botch, I interrupted, which there isn't. To the contrary, if anything. She reflects on the fact that, considering how nervous she has been, that she is part demon, that she's part of a bad cross, the fact that all of these objects assumed she was human is rather comforting, although she's not entirely sure what their basis is. Like, is it just that she is human in comparison to Khan, which seems like a real base level sort of comparison, and does that even mean anything? But yeah. So he tells her the necklet will allow you to find your way back here. You may, if you wish, investigate these things further, having prepared yourself. Which I'm just, not encouraging her to do right now. She has enough on her plate, basically. And she takes it for granted that that's not going to happen. She says that kind of preparation takes decades of apprenticeship. Ruthless, single-minded, hair-raising apprenticeship. Which I really enjoyed that description of it. Because, yeah, I bet it is. No, thank you. So then they discuss getting back. He says there are few magic handlers who could have traveled the way you traveled this evening to come here and live. If you will accept advice from me, I would suggest you not come that way again. To which she's like, no, duh, I definitely won't. That was terrible. I hated it. So this is when he tells her that they aren't going to go the way, like they're not using that way back. They're not just walking. But it's sort of, okay, so she says, I don't know how we came out above again into the ordinary night with a little ordinary breeze and a few ordinary bats swooshing around. Bats. How quaint. I love that so much. Eventually we were walking on rough grass and turf with bats skating overhead. And she is stepping over reality onto sort of stepping stones of, there's this moment, it's like so weird. Well, His shorter way was a little like stepping on stepping stones while the torrent foamed around your feet. In this case, the torrent of that conventional reality I was so eager to return to, and threatening at any moment to surge over the edge and sweep you away. I almost certainly would have lost my balance without his hand. You had to look down to see where to put your feet, and reality careering past at Mach 112 is seriously dizzy-making. Plus, some of the stepping stones were dangerously slick, disconcertingly like ordinary stones in an ordinary stream. Although I didn't want to think what they were slick with, nor what the equivalent of getting soaking wet might be if I fell off. Yeah, that doesn't sound awesome. Like, I really love this description. It's just so weird, and I don't want to do this ever. It sounds very nerve-wracking. I'm not a fan. Then the stones seemed to get bigger and bigger, and the torrent slowed and grew calm, as if we were at the we were at the edge of Yolanda's garden. I didn't notice him leave. I don't remember his dropping my hand, but as I recognized the shape of the house, I realized I was alone. Which, again, Con. He just leaves? It's just so rude, you know? She's been through some shit. She saved your life. You bring her home, and then you just bounce, like, in a second. I guess Beau's people are after you, but still, I don't like it. And she falls asleep on her bed immediately without taking off his shirt. And when she wakes up, she's in kind of a not as bad a state as she was when she got back initially from being captured. But she's like kind of fucked up, you know, she's injured. She's from falling when she tried to literally run away from her own past. And she takes a hot bath and tries to soak off her injuries in the same way that she did before. Also, she decides that what she's going to do, and I'm not clear on exactly why she's doing this. She says, I hadn't a clue how to clean up after last night's magic, because remember, her grandmother told her that if she ever performed magic, that she needs to clean up after herself and like undo whatever she did or, you know, whatever. But she doesn't know exactly what to do in the case of this spell that she did with burning herbs and whatnot. But I knew I should be doing something. So the compromise was, I introduced the necklace to my other talismans. As a solemn rite, it wasn't much. I was cross-legged on the very rucked-up sheets of my bed, and still dripping from the bath, wrapped in an assortment of towels. I had pulled my little knife from the pants pocket of the trousers on the floor, and took the mysterious seal out of the bed-table drawer. I smoothed a bit of pillow and laid them there. Then, gently, I lifted the chain off over my head and dropped it down around them. I don't know what I was expecting. It just seemed like the thing to do. Knife, meet necklace. Seal, meet necklace. Necklace, meet knife and seal. I suspect we are going into some kind of fracas together and that you are my co-conspirators. You and that underground guy. And I want to make sure you're all on speaking terms with one another before I ask you to guard my back. Or something. It was too late in the year for direct sunlight to touch my pillow at that time of day, so I don't know what happened. But there was a flash like, well, a ray of sunshine, but it was some ray, like a golden sword, like a Christian saint's vision of glory. It landed on my talismans with an almost audible whoomp, like the king's grip had slipped and he'd clobbered the knight on the shoulder instead of merely tapping gently and dubbing him Sir Thing. And the pillow caught fire. I sat there with steam suddenly boiling off my wet towels, my mouth open, staring. And my brain had gone on vacation without advance warning because I reached into the fire, closed my hands around my 3 talismans, gathered them together, and pulled them out of the fire. The fire went out. The pillow lay there, charred and smoking. My hands felt a little hot. No big deal. When I opened my hands, there were 3 overlapping red marks on the palms. One long, thin, almost rectangular oval for the knife, one small, shorter, fatter oval for the seal, and a scarlet curl over the ball of one thumb, a slightly ragged thread-width stripe for the chain. None of the objects themselves now felt any more than human body temperature warm. None of them had looked a trace different than they had a minute ago. Before they had been set on fire by persons or forces unknown. "Oh," I said. My voice quavered. "Oh my." So damn. I don't know what that means, but something big just happened. And she's working with way more magic than she intends to. And damn. I'm just like, I really want to know more about this. Also, there's something so like unjust about the fact that she can grab them and not like, be burned by the fire, and they can immediately go back to being human body temperature. But the pillow still has to be like a charred disaster, and her sheets need to be washed again, which just feels incredibly inconvenient. Like, if we're going to have everything be fine, can't we have everything be fine? But no, she has to go and throw away that damn pillow. So she goes to work, and SOF corners her again. She tries to get out of it, but there's no doing it. And they decide that they want her to go into this, like, I hesitate to use the word trance, but they want her to do this thing where she's tracking somebody via the computer again. And they get on her case a lot about the fact that she went ahead and did this with Emil off the clock. She's not on the clock with them ever, but you get what I'm saying. Like, this was not a sanctioned thing, and it apparently counts as attempting to like seek out alien hostiles. Some kind of wording that he uses, which is apparently one of those laws that's like nobody really follows this law or takes it seriously, but it's really convenient to use when you need to fuck somebody's life up and you don't have anything else, which is just really mean and annoying. So yeah, let's see. I'm trying to find... I could probably tie you up in a big knot of top-secret intelligence bureaucracy. We've got powers to compel ordinary citizens in certain circumstances. Did you know that? And we can make these the right kind of circumstances. Never fear. But it would take too long, and I suspect it would make you ornery. We need you too badly to risk pissing you off if we can get you any other way. By the way, you were planning on coming to us with anything you found on the other end of Emil's cosmails, weren't you? You don't have any noble suicidal plans to take these suckers on by yourself, do you? Tell me you are not that stupid. I said with perfect honesty, I have no intention of trying to take these suckers on by myself, no. Pat looked at me with a slight frown. Why doesn't that sound as reassuring as it should? I gazed back at him as innocently as I could. So he tells her that he's going to come back for her at 10 after they have closed. And then says something about, we don't want you walking around by yourself at that hour in case Bozo gets wise between now and then. And the fact that he uses the name Bozo when the dude's name is Bo worries her a little bit. And she's like, Bo, is that his name? Just asking. And he says that that's just what they're calling him. They never have names. But we're chasing a master vampire here, and it's easier if we call him something. So she tells him finally that she'll come, that Emil can either come be part of the safety net or sit at home waiting for really bad news and be hauled over the carpet and messily fired later on. And then he asks her about the bruises, because she was able to cover up most of them by wearing long sleeves and long pants, but there are some on her chin and neck, I think. Or maybe on her arm, and she has to roll her sleeves up a couple times. But she just says that it's from when she fell out of the chair when she was doing her unsanctioned search with Emil. So then finally, there is this moment... Okay, she goes and sees SOF, but before that, there is this dude who comes to the coffee house, And he talks about how the end of the world is going to come about when there is a permanent eclipse. The moon would be held in place by the something-o-meter invented by the creatures of the dark and which they were presently perfecting. He said creatures of the dark, not vampires. I suppose I was in a twitchy mood anyway, but I didn't like this. There are lots of creatures of the dark, but I would have said that except for vampires, none of them is bright enough to invent a something-o-meter. So why didn't he say vampires? He did say 18 months tops before the eclipse began. It was a good thing he hadn't washed in a while and raved like a loony, or some of us might have believed him. And she notices that when he goes around and is talking to people, some folks do seem a little bit flipped out by him. She notices Mrs. Bielowski is listening a little bit too intently, and she's aware, but it's not a confirmed thing. But Ray is thinking about how maybe Mrs. Bielowski might be wondering if this were true, what would even happen regarding moon phases. And Mel says, hey, a little live entertainment for slack time. This one missed the mark, okay? Next time I'll get jugglers. But at the same time, he's touching this tattoo on his arm that is a charm that looks like an hourglass. It's a charm about not running out of time. He'd been listening to the crazy too. So this is interesting, the fact that this guy kind of got under everybody's skin. I wonder if this means anything. I have a hard time believing she'd mention it if it didn't. And then I couldn't see into the shadows on Mel's face. They flickered less than some, but the red edges were more dazzling, as if to make up for this. I didn't know if I couldn't see past the dazzle because I couldn't, or because I didn't want to. If I didn't want to, what was it I was afraid I was going to be seeing? Interesting. Is there something Mel's not telling her about himself? Very curious. All right, so she finally gets picked up by SOF. It's Pat. I paused briefly under the doorway. A few days ago, I'd tacked up a string over the lintel so I could stuff some of Mom's charms up there. They balanced on the narrow lintel edge and were kept from pitching over by the string. She hadn't said anything, but then we'd never discussed the fact that she was coming into the bakery when I wasn't there and leaving charms around, so the glove compartment was full, or she was wearing me down. And they wouldn't last long trying to protect a doorway that had people coming and going through it all the time. But at least they could keep their eyes on me while I was still there. The funny thing was that I'd begun to feel them there, and kind of didn't mind. I've said that charms usually rub me the wrong way, like a rash or a colicky baby living in the spare bedroom whose mom sleeps deeper than you do. And when I stood under the doorway for a moment, I felt their goodwill. I'm not sure it was any stronger than that, soaking in. I felt like a baba sucking up rum, or possibly chopped Piccadilly vegetables in vinegar. I shook my head to make the opalescent change swish over my skin and patted my pockets. So, yeah, this is an interesting development. I'm wondering if this necklace is influencing that. Does she feel better about this stuff because of it somehow? I don't know why that would be, but the magic of this necklace is really nebulous at this moment. All he says is this will help you find your way back here. But it feels like there has to be more to what this is than just that. So this is when he mentions the, the boxes, the tickers. They're these black boxes that are meant to sort of register when there is other activity. And she says something very offhand like, oh yeah, and they don't work. And he's like, actually, they definitely work. It's just that they keep getting sabotaged because there are tons of people around who are part blood and just don't want them to do any readings because that would be very inconvenient for them. We've got some tickers that give us pretty good readings once we figured out how to set them up. And I'll tell you that a couple we got down in No Town about fused their chips when you did your locating trick for us a few days ago. And they did it again that afternoon when it turns out you were committing your felony with Emil. Felony my ass, I said. Attempting to consort with an enemy alien is a felony, my pretty darling, and all others are enemy aliens. It's not one of those rules anyone wants to pursue too close, but it has its uses, and trying to locate him is near enough to trying to consort with him for me. Anyway, we've never had readings like these readings. What you're up to may be psychodoodlings, but they're great, big, strong psychodoodlings, and we're beginning to hope you may be the best chance we've seen in years, and not another one of my over-optimistic bad calls. And she almost flips the fuck out here. Like, this whole thing is really playing into her fear that she's a bad cross and that she's like on the edge of just losing it and murdering everybody. While half my brain was considering the nervous breakdown recourse, the other half was considering whether maybe I could locate Bo well enough and then let SOF handle it. Con and I wouldn't have to go within miles of No Town. We could sit at home drinking champagne and waiting for the headlines. New Arcadia SOF division eliminates major vampire lair and destroys its master. Our correspondent, blah, blah, blah. My imagination wanted most important strike since Voodoo Wars, but it wouldn't be. It felt global to me because it was my life on the line. But it wasn't going to happen that way. I didn't even know why. Not to be able to explain it, but I could feel it, like you could feel a stomachache or a cold coming on or somebody's eyes staring a hole in your back. SOF could go in and mess things up for a little while, stake a few young vampires, and maybe wreck Bo's immediate plans, but maybe this was something else I was learning to see in the shadows. Maybe it was from traveling through Nowheresville or walking Con's short ways last night when I was somewhere else, watching my reality stream by. I was beginning to understand how the connections with the vampire world really aren't like our human connections to our human world. And then talks about, like, being tethered to Con and the weird bond that Con has with Bo and just how, like, totally different this whole culture, for lack of a better word, really is. So Con could have said something that second morning by the lake. Would it have occurred to him? No. Besides, what was he going to say? Die now or later? That had been the choice all along, and as far as my situation now being the mere sad inevitable result of my being in the wrong place at the wrong time, grow up, sunshine. Bo would be just a tiny bit irritated with me personally, having not only escaped, but taking his prize prisoner with him. So, yeah, that is, ordinary mortals don't survive introductory vampire encounters. I like that. Introductory Vampire Encounters 101. So, here comes the thunder. So she wants to find Bo. She finally decides that even if she's working with SOF, even if this isn't exactly how she wants to be doing this, she wants to pinpoint him, and she wants to not get sucked in again the way that she did when she was doing this with Emil. So she decides that as much as the danger is real and that she doesn't necessarily have control, she's going to try this out. And she keeps thinking this thing to herself: my sunshine self, my tree self, my dear self. Didn't we outnumber the dark self? Question: sunshine self, dear self. Sure, I remember those. Tree self, I don't remember that one. What's that? Guys, help me out on that. But anyway, so then she wonders about the ticker and whether or not that could have registered her and Con. If SOF was now going to start keeping a closer watch on me, were they going to plant a ticker near Yolanda's house? Oh, gods, could she disable an SOF ticker? So yeah, that's a good question. One that hadn't occurred to me. Rosalie says, I think tree self is something she could feel when she got the deer. Oh, okay. Interesting. I don't remember that. I obviously remember the whole deer thing, but I didn't remember the tree thing. So here comes the comm box. And even before plugging into the live connection, it looked evil to me. The flickering print seemed to have a kind of bulgy red edge, so that it looked like tiny scarlet mouths howling behind every letter of every word. Ready? Said Pat. I sat down and put my hands on the keyboard like I was going to do some perfectly ordinary calm thing. Tap a few keys, see what the headlines were on the dark line. Ready, I said. He pressed the GlobeNet button and the mail went live. I was almost sucked in after all. Hey, I didn't know what I was doing. Was there an apprenticeship for this? The GlobeNet hasn't been around all that long, but magic handlers adapt pretty fast. If I had been apprentice, could I have learned how to trace a cosmail? No. This was something magic handlers now routinely did. If this was something magic handlers now routinely did, SOF would have a division of magic handlers that did it, and they wouldn't be all over me like a cheap suit. I was going where no one had gone before, and I wasn't having a good time. So this is when her talismans seem to step in. She feels them heating up, and she says like 0 to 100 in nothing flat with the throttle all the way open, like a cold, inert vampire being brought back to undeadness by a surprise drop-in guest. Maybe, yeah, so he was trapped in the in-between. That seems to like lend credence, Rosalie, that line to what you're talking about. It was excruciating. It was like being dragged forward and hauled backward simultaneously. Other space yawned, and while last night, with Khan at the far end of the backcountry lane version, it had merely been remote and unearthly and nowhere, tonight it was the bad one again, the shrieking maelstrom. If I went headfirst into this one, I wouldn't come out, except in small, messy pieces. So, she, as she puts it, frisks on the boundary and tries to, like, find the edges of where the, dangerous territory is. She is in the middle. I was trying to angle for a view so I could see where the compass needle pointed. There. And I was flung over backward with the chair and landed on the floor so hard the breath was knocked out of me. This was just as well, because Pat's comm box exploded. Droplets of superheated flying goo rained down on me, as well as tiny fragments of God knows what and larger pieces of plastic housing. There were a few half-muffled shouts of surprise and pain, and then there were a lot of alarm bells ringing. I was still struggling to get some breath back in my lungs when people started arriving. I had thought those were real alarm bells. They were. So here comes the goddess of pain. Poor Pat, first of all, gets hit by a real big chunk and winds up needing stitches in his shoulder. It was everybody's just a little bit hurt. But they are rattled by it, understandably. This is not something they have done before. This is not something that they have experienced before. The woman came in and the tension level in the room went off the scale. I felt like we were in one of those old-fashioned movie rockets where the G's of escape velocity crush you into the upholstery. I'm like, what? That moment where the G's of escape velocity crushed you into the upholstery. What? I want to go to one of those old-fashioned movie rockets, please. Please? Please? I want a movie rocket. What is that even? What? She just throws shit out there. I don't even... She just says it like it's just, oh yeah, movie rocket. Okay. When I first looked at her, there were no shadows on her at all. It was as if she was glowing in great sick-making waves like a walking nuclear reactor or something. If I had ever seen a nuclear reactor, which I have not. Instant headache, instant wanting to be out of here, wherever here was. Here-ness seemed to fade under the onslaught of her mere presence. I had thought the name Goddess of Pain was just a joke. Uh-oh. So, this bitch is mad and also highly sketchy. She's mad because of the fact that what she, being Ray, did, has fucked up their entire computer system. And he tries to argue, Pat, that he had clearance for this, but she's like, you were doing some shit you don't understand on a system that's connected to everybody else's, so obviously you didn't do anything to safeguard any of the other equipment here. You didn't inform me of exactly what you were going to do, and this just obviously isn't something that you thought through. So yeah, this is completely on you. The fact that you didn't know what would happen because you've never done this before only means that you should have worked a lot harder to ensure nothing could possibly go wrong than to just dive in head first and fucking hope for the best, which does seem like what he was doing. To be fair, she has a bit of a point here. As for safeguards, and he ran off into a bit of technical jargon I didn't understand a syllable of and didn't want to, it turned out. By this time I was breathing again, although my lungs felt sore. My eyeballs felt like they were embedded in glass splinters, and my entire skull throbbed. So, this woman decides that she's going to come over to talk to Ray about what was going on and try and get her to tell is the wrong word. Trolling is the word that Ray uses here. That she's essentially trying to raid Ray's brain for information without her permission. That this is a hugely illegal method, but you have to be able to prove that this happened and prove that there was intent there, because then she tries to argue with Ray that, oh, I'm sorry, I just automatically do this with my my officers, so it was just habit, when of course that's not true at all. So she also keeps on mentioning things to Ray about her past that Ray doesn't like her knowing, and I couldn't help but be a little bit frustrated by Ray here, because obviously she's going to know this stuff. What's been going on with you is common knowledge amongst the town. You don't think that SOF is going to know everything? But yeah, she thinks that it's power residue from her experience at the lake. But it is the first such incident I'm aware of in any of our records, and I would like to know as much about it as possible. SOF is always interested in unusual and unique cases. We have to be. I saw it out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't that she didn't mean it exactly. It was that it was an official lubricant on the sticky gears of community smile. It suited her aura of poisonous gases, a toxic oil slick on the sea of society. I didn't like the smile. I found Pat's single-minded commitment to the total annihilation of vampires a little inopportune, but I believed he was one of the good guys. I didn't believe she was. Interesting. So what is she? Because this glow that's coming off her, I really assumed initially was supernatural. And now I'm is that just her aura as a person? Is that just her personality? What she gives off as a vibe? I don't know if the trolling process that she tries to work on Ray is something that's I would assume she'd have to be part blood in order to do that, but maybe not. I don't really know how that works, but the fact that there's a law against it specifically makes me feel it can't be a part demon thing, because that they're not supposed to be part of SOF in the first place. There wouldn't be a specific law, because it would be assumed that there's no part bloods in the SOF to begin with, so we don't need to worry about that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very curious about who this woman is and exactly what she does. So let's see. I'm trying to find Milenkovic. What's going on with Milenkovic? I assume tonight's misguided attempt at a connection was also based on some faulty reading of that same residue. There's a precedent. Milenkovic, you'll have to do better than that, Agent Velasquez, interrupted the goddess. Milenkovic was a senile old woman. Ma'am, Milenkovic's field notes clearly record, and then there's a background noise, essentially, of Ray I didn't think she was listening to Pat's dogged description of poor Malenkovic's misfortunes. I concentrated on looking stunned and blank and maybe stupid. I was a marginal high school grad who baked bread for a living. Intellect was not a big feature. Hold that thought. Behind the blank look, I was testing the memory of what had happened while I was plugged in. Had I found anything, or had I been repelled before I could make a fix? So Ray doesn't even know if she's got anything in her head, and this is when she really feels this woman rattling around in her head. Meanwhile, Emil, her friend, is trying to step in and get her to go, like, get the goddess to give her the okay to take Ray home. And this is when she realizes she's trolling me and puts up an arm to kind of stop her. So I'm going to read this description here and see if I can. There's a license you can get to do a mind search under certain circumstances, but there is a list of prior requirements as long as the Global Council's charter. Besides that, you need to be a magic handler, particularly talented in etherfoe interchange. Etherfoe, I guess that would be. And in practice, there are only a few specialist cops and specialist lawyers who get one, and likely some SOFs. But if the goddess had the license, she was misusing it now. Okay, so she's a magic handler. Okay, so there's so much information in these chapters that I am bound to miss stuff here and there. Okay, so she's a magic handler. So that could be definitely part of why she's not a good guy, because apparently Blaze was like a disaster. I guess magic could go to your head. I could see that happening with me. Hey, I said, and put up my arm as if to ward off a physical blow. So this, she thinks, stops her because it calls her out, but she's not entirely sure what this woman was able to get. This isn't like, there are certain versions of like mind reading in which the person being read is aware of what the other person's seeing and can feel that information being like brought to the fore, feel it being viewed, feel it being taken. And it doesn't seem like that's how this works. She's doing this, and Ray just has to hope that she shut it down in time, but she doesn't know what the woman actually got. So it's not like, for example, when Harry Potter is practicing occlumency, and he's seeing his own memories like flashing before his eyes as Snape looks at them, you know? So if she was just mega hot on vampires, she and Pat would be buddies, and they weren't. It also occurred to me that she couldn't have pulled anything out of me because if she had, she'd have found a way to hold me, and she was letting me go. So maybe, but also maybe she's just going to wait for you to make a move and then follow you. Like, I get your logic there, and I would love to believe that, but I don't entirely believe that. Like, there is a point where with somebody like Ray, holding you is not going to be productive, because then you're going to know that they're onto you and you're going to shut down and not tell them anything. If you think that they don't know, then you're going to get lazy and just do shit that they can then come down on you for. So yeah, I'm feeling real nervous about this. I don't care for it. So Pat comes up and he says, I've left Jessie trying to deal with the goddess. Sorry, Sunshine. Can you move any faster? I want all of us out of here before she thinks of a reason to yank us back in. So she, has to stop outside and like kind of like chill for a second, because the combo of like what she did with Combox and being mentally searched by this bitch is really getting to her. And she kind of has to like hold on to reality, I feel like is the way I want to put that. I don't know if this might be of any help to you, and pulled a bit of exploded Combox from her pocket and offered it to me. You darling, I said. Sympathetic magic is never the best, and is usually the crudest, but when you wanted grounding, there is nothing better, and any damn fool with a drop of magic handler blood 6 generations back can tap it. I held the scrap of plastic in both hands. This time, I didn't have to turn around. I felt it slamming in over my right shoulder, no, through it, toward my heart, like a stake into a vampire. I dropped the bit of Combox and threw myself away from its line of flight. The chain round my neck and the knife and seal in my pocket blazed up again, and I seemed to have a friction burn across the front of my right shoulder, where the whatever it was had grazed me in passing. It felt like someone had taken an electric sander to me. Pat caught me. "Wow," he said, and almost dropped me as if he'd caught hold of something burning. But he was a true SOF, or he had his damsel rescuing hat on that evening, or he was more worried about me than the skin of his hands or the stitches in his shoulder. He flinched, but his grip tightened. "Sorry," I said. "That was a little of what blew the comm box." "What in the world is that? I'm dying to know. What is this?" So he asks her where this is coming from. She says no town, which we already knew. He says, "So we blew out the comm system, destroyed a lot of equipment. The goddess of pain is up our butts, and all we know is it's no town. Bloody hell." I feel like she's got to have gotten more than that, and she's just not telling him right. So she finally asks, "Who is this woman?" "The goddess of pain? Sunshine, you're slipping. She's second in command here at Div HQ. Division headquarters. But we keep hoping she'll get promoted out of regional and out of our hair." "Does she have any unconventional personal wards or anything?" Pat looked at me in that too alert way I didn't like. "You mean other than the fact that her walking into a room makes any sane person want to run out of it? You mean she's got that effect as a switch on her control board? Sunshine, what are you picking up?" "Nothing. Too much happened tonight." "She tried to troll you, didn't she?" "Yes," I said. "But you blocked her," said Pat. "Thank the listening gods. I'm glad you blocked her anyway, but I always like seeing the goddess screw up." Oh, snap. Oh, snap. Oh, snap. That's the end of that section. So yeah, who's this bitch? What's she up to, though? I'm really curious. Magic handlers, I guess, like, she talks earlier a little bit about how being a magic handler can prolong your life. But that there's not, like, I guess they're still human, technically. They're just able to use magic to extend their health, I guess. So yeah, she's just a person, but a magic handling person. All right. Do you guys have any more questions before I wrap up? I'm over time here, as I am wont to do lately. Keep on messing up with that. But I have to go and read 4 Dresden Files, which I'm going to be starting in like an hour. I have had a full day. All right. Well, I am not seeing anything. All right, cool. Well, thank you both so much for being here. Thank you, Rosalie, for booking this episode. And I believe the next one wraps up the book. Am I right? That's the end of it. So that's exciting. Damn. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Oh, ends the section. Okay, cool. I was thinking, I was like, how are they wrap up all of this in that one? Okay, this makes more sense. Cool. Yay! All right, thank you again so much, and I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.